I'm Violet Hott. Welcome to the Morgan County Partnership's Read-Along series on race and diversity from PBS Kids. Today we will be reading excerpts from Little Leaders, Bold Women in Black History by Vashti Harrison. Sojourner Truth, circa 1797 to 1883, abolitionist, women's rights advocate. Sojourner was born a slave in upstate New York under the name Isabel Baumfree. Under the state's Gradual Emancipation Act, she was due her freedom in 1827. When she realized her slave owner was planning to keep her enslaved, Sojourner ran away with her infant daughter in tow. But this came at a huge cost. She had to leave behind her 5-year-old son. The slave owner sold Sojourner's son to a plantation 1,000 miles away in Alabama. Meanwhile, Sojourner remained in hiding in New York until her freedom was official. When the coast was clear, Sojourner made a court case, saying her son had been sold illegally. She was one of the first black women to file a court case in America, and even though it seemed nearly impossible, she won. She got her son back. In 1883, she changed her name to Sojourner, which means traveler, and became a preacher. She traveled the country sharing her messages for women's rights and the abolition of slavery everywhere. Although Sojourner could neither read nor write, her voice carried far. In December of 1851, she gave a speech that she made up on the spot. In it, she advocated on behalf of black women who faced the double discrimination of racism and sexism and had often been left out of the fight for equality. The speech is known by its most famous refrain, "Ain't I a woman?" She went on to encourage African Americans to fight on behalf of the Union in the Civil War, for former slaves to be given places to live, and for desegregation of streetcars. She was an agitator and a fierce activist for equality. Ella Fitzgerald, 1917 to 1996, jazz singer. As a young woman in Virginia, Ella longed for independence and dreamed of one day becoming an entertainer. As a teenager, she was living on the streets and singing for pennies. But in 1934, at the age of 17, she got her big break. She entered the amateur night contest at the Apollo Theater in Harlem. She signed up as a dancer at first, but changed her routine to singing when she saw her competition. They were all dressed in sparkling matching dresses, while she was in tattered clothes. But she wowed the audience with her unique voice and won the first place prize of $25, worth about $500 today, literally going from rags to riches. The following year, she landed a role as lead singer with Chick Webb and his orchestra, a popular band that regularly played at one of Harlem's hottest nightclubs, the Savoy Ballroom. At the same time, she was building a solo career. In 1938, she recorded her first album and her first hit single, A Tisket a Tasket. Her career snowballed from there. In the 1950s, she developed her famous instrumental style of singing called scatting. She collaborated with greats from all over the music industry, including Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, Count Basie, and Frank Sinatra. In 1958, she made history when she became the first African-American woman to win a Grammy. Over her long and successful career, she recorded more than 200 albums and some 2,000 songs. Ella has gone down in history as one of the most iconic voices of all times. She was fondly known as the First Lady of Jazz and the First Lady of Song. Shirley Chisholm, 1924 to 2005, teacher, politician, activist. Shirley was born in Brooklyn, New York, but spent 7 years of her childhood in Barbados with her grandmother. When she returned to the United States, she arrived with a new accent and a new sense of boldness others later described as uniquely Caribbean. In college, she became involved in politics and student organizations. She had strong opinions and a fiery determination that made people stop and listen. Shirley worked as a teacher in Brooklyn and made a name for herself as a leader and advocate in her neighborhood. She volunteered and consulted at organizations that lifted up the community, including the Bureau of Child Welfare, the Brooklyn Home for Aged Colored People, and the local NAACP. She was active in local political organizations as well, such as the Democratic Women's Workshop, the League of Women Voters, and the Bedford-Stuyvesant Political League. She stood up for racial equality and welfare and confronted local politicians. Her outspokenness made her very appealing to the community and very intimidating to politicians in power. In 1964, she earned a seat in the New York State Assembly, and in 1968, she became the first black woman elected to the U.S. Congress. She made waves when she crossed party lines and stood up to the old leaders of her party. She was an independent thinker and was never one to stay in her own lane. In 1972, she announced her run for president, making history as the first woman and the first person of color to bid for a major party nomination. She ultimately lost, but she did achieve her goal of making her party more aware of and responsive to the people. Octavia E. Butler, 1947 to 2006. Writer. Despite her struggle with dyslexia, Octavia began writing when she was 10 years old. One day, she was watching a bad science fiction movie on TV and was inspired to write something better. This was her first attempt at writing sci-fi, a genre that would later become synonymous with her name. She continued to write short stories through college and attended Pennsylvania's renowned Clarion Science Fiction Writers Workshop. In 1976, she published her first novel, Pattern Master. It made waves. A science fiction novel with black female characters had never been seen before. However, Octavia's big moment came in 1979 when she published Kindred. Inspired by her mother's experiences as a maid, it tells the story of a black woman who travels back to the times of slavery. She wanted to write a story that would make others feel the history, the pain and fear that black people have had to live through in order to endure. Octavia's publishers had a hard time categorizing her books, especially Kindred. Was it fantasy, history, science fiction, or fiction? And they were unsure about her audience. Did black women read science fiction? Octavia in her books proved that they did. Octavia created a space for black girls to like science fiction, a genre historically associated with white male writers and readers. She wanted to change the industry's perception of who the writers and the readers were and show that science fiction could be for anyone. Through her fantastical works, Octavia discussed important topics in her own life and society: race, slavery, humanity, and religion. In 1995, she was awarded the prestigious MacArthur Foundation Fellowship, the first science fiction writer to receive it. Dr. Mae Jemison, born 1956. Engineer, physician, astronaut. As a child, Mae loved to read, especially books about science and astronomy. By the time she was in kindergarten, she knew she wanted to become a scientist. This, however, did not keep her from other passions. Mae also wanted to be a dancer, and throughout her youth, she studied every type of dance. In college in the 1970s, Mae double majored in chemical engineering and African American studies. When she learned about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., she saw his work as a call to action to help people, so after graduating, she decided to become a doctor. She joined the Peace Corps in 1983 and traveled to West Africa on a 2-year program to provide medical assistance to those in need. After returning, she saw major changes taking place at NASA. In 1983, for example, Sally Ride became the first American woman in space. Meg had always imagined herself in space but was hesitant to pursue that dream. But it was seeing the actress Nichelle Nichols play Lieutenant Uhura in the TV show Star Trek that finally inspired her to apply to the space program. In 1987, Mae became the first black woman in the astronaut training program, and a few years later, she flew into orbit as the first African American woman in space. Mae still wanted to have a direct impact on people, so she left NASA in 1993 and created her own company, the Jemison Group, which researches ways technology can help people in their daily lives. She also started the Dorothy Jemison Foundation for Excellence, which in 1994 launched the Earth We Share, a science camp for children. Thanks for watching, and don't forget that you are unique, important, and wonderfully made.
Woohoo! Mrs. Hot here, and thanks for joining us tonight for our Race and Diversity series book, Little Leaders by Vashti Harrison. It's time for Let's Talk About It. Here's your first question. There are many other influential women of color who changed history. Now, try and think of another female leader's story that was not discussed today. Take a second, think about that. Did you come up with someone? Oh, I know someone. How about Michelle Obama? She's pretty influential. Who did you come up with? Good job. Here's our next question. These women are inspiring. Pause on the next slide to save the image and recreate your own little leader. That was Possum. Way to go, super scholars. We hope you really enjoyed joining us for our Race and Diversity series, and come back for our next book. It's called Mufaro's Beautiful Daughters. And until then, remember this: you are unique, you are important, and you are wonderfully made. See ya. Love you. Bye.